Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Colton, and today we're going to be going over a newer horror series on YouTube I came across. And it has this guy who's like going through the wilderness, in the darkness, going through these decrepit buildings and things like that. It kind of reminds me of like those people who would like investigate abandoned places, or those like fake videos where they used to be like, oh, I saw a ghost, and you know, it's like in the corner of your eye or something. It kind of reminds me a lot of this series, but the person who did this series, which is called Briscoe Park, but it's under the channel of the same name, I feel like they use that media really well to start telling like this story that we'll end up getting into. But I encourage you first to actually go and watch the channel for yourself, because trust me, you will enjoy it. Like, I hadn't done one of these horror analysis videos in a minute because I hadn't really came across any in a while that I actually wanted to watch. But today the past like couple weeks, I got really intrigued by this series, and it's so odd and different. I promise you, you should watch it. So before we get into my video on it, I'm gonna tell you pretty much what I'm gonna be doing throughout the video. Is I'm gonna do an analysis over each tape. Give my thoughts about each, point out the frames and things that are very easy to miss, but are kind of pivotal in understanding what's going on. I'll go over the descriptions of each, and also eventually I'm going to start building up my theory as to what I think this story is getting at. It's very hard to like understand at first, but eventually you'll see, because it really builds on itself well. But yeah, so let's get into the ambient horror of Briscoe Park. We start out with tape 04, which, you already think it's weird. Where's tape 1, 2, or 3? Each description of each tape has this thing where it says submission statement, which I will end up reading them out loud for each one. The first submission statement says, barrel mostly contained. Minor disturbances detected. No need to follow up. Tape 04 is also called barrel in the footage. It says this is subject 9D, and it's 3:23 a.m. on October 21st, but the year is redacted. We immediately see the person panning around, and they spot a house in this darkness of a green plain. We can see this bright orange thing in the back as they approach the house. The house is one of those old abandoned ones you may find in the woods that you completely avoid entering, but this person does. They of course go through a crawl space and then enter. A pigeon flies in and then just dips into the void, which is great. I love when there's animals just like going in and out of existence. And that's when they spotted the barrel. There's a split second where at the bottom of the screen, like down here, it actually says RDP 79-00999A, then followed by 3 zeros, a 2, 3 zeros again, 1, 2 zeros, 2 8s, -9. Which, if you put that in your search bar, which is really strange, by the way, you get like this talk about like CIA like documentation that has to do with like multiple universes and things such as that, which I don't want to give it away. And it takes a while before we really start to understand this, but literally this first hint is something that ends up kind of explaining a little bit of what's going on. But you'll see this creator does not give us like anything for a minute. They see a rat also go up the stairs, but they're pretty compromised. We then see them investigate around until they look down the stairs into the basement. And we start hearing a tapping noise, which I did not like, by the way. Like, I was watching this like at like 5 in the morning. Was not digging that. The person understandably hustles away from the house. And that's the end of tape 04, which, like I said, we already get this hint to this greater thing going on behind the scenes, and something to do with multiple universes, or just a weird, CIA kind of thing going on, which the whole submission statement thing is already weird. So that's the first tape down. Now we can go into tape 5. The description says, submission statement. After further review, I was being watched. Follow-up not required. Tape 05 is called Window, which you'll notice after these first two entries, the titles of all of them kind of go away. This is subject 12A, and the source says Scanate. The date is October 22nd with the year redacted. It has a person walking an older rural road with a large decrepit building already spotted, and then many more buildings such as a church. It honestly looks like a lot of churches. They eventually walk up to a decrepit one. It cuts twice as they look around, and then cuts again to them walking up to an old house. They go into the house, and you can tell it's just degraded by time. They go up the stairs and explore. They look in a few rooms and come back down. They then wander around outside again, seeing many decrepit houses that look the same. We see them walking down an old road. They then walk up to another old house, and it cuts to them just standing and then panning to a house. It sits there, and then they just start walking again, with no ambience being heard, which is already weird because normally we always hear the ambience. You always hear like the little bit of noise that you'd hear out in the wild, which they've kept in all the videos. But for some reason here they went like zero noise mode. I don't really understand why. But later on I'll kind of see, and you'll kind of see too. Again, it's kind of just setting us up for what's going on, like what we're doing in each video and what's to come. Now we're on to tape 06. The description says, submission statement, minor visual and auditory disturbances. Follow-up may be required. Which, you never like hearing that in a video. That's cool. It has them walking up to an old church with a basement entrance on the side. It kind of reminds me of the COD Modern Warfare 1 mission. I know that might take away from the horror right now, but it reminds me of that mission where like you have to get across the field because there's like a helicopter trying to like zone you down. They go up the stairs and to the door to enter. After looking in the second floor, they go back outside and into the bottom. A lot of ambience can be heard. When they go inside, there's a photo that hasn't been worn down much in a frame. There's multiple, and it seems to be some religious group. It then cuts out, and the ambience is gone. The recorder starts sprinting away after the jump cut. And when they're outside, you can see a couple of lights, and they seem paranoid. It then cuts to them walking around the trees. Though, if we go back to where it jump cut at, and you move by frame by frame, which there's a lot of that, which I'm gonna be like showing you different stuff that I caught while watching, and some obviously like yes, I did try to go see what other people were seeing, but if we go back to the jump cut and look at this small frame, there seems to be a completely pale figure sitting in the room, and after that we can see something in the window that looks the exact same, which pretty spooky. And I would have been running out of that house too, which I don't think I would have went in there in the first place, but I definitely would be booking it by then. Tape 7's description says, submission statement, no disturbances detected beyond last distance documented. Follow-up not required. They go into another old house. The house has some pulley system that looks like something, I don't know if I can say the word on YouTube, but you get the vibe, and the ambience gets really loud when it shows it. So clearly there is an emphasis on that. If you look out the window around like 24 seconds, there seems to possibly be eyeballs like those glowing lights from before. It then has them walking around outside again, and that's where that tape ends. So I know we didn't get much from this one, but it's already, we can see all these things that are like man-made structures, or like that pale figure kind of looked human-ish, but not quite human. It's really weird. Also, the whole pulley thing doesn't give me a lot of hope. That could be something, I don't know. Tape 08 is next, and from the jump, we see an orange orb. The submission statement this time says, visual disturbance detected, cornfield, follow-up not required. Our wanderer starts through a cornfield as said in the submission statement. It starts out with ambience and him walking through. Then the ambience goes away and he starts running until he reaches a structure. After looking around in it, they start hustling outside. He enters a gate And at 2 minutes and 56 seconds, we can see a white figure duck behind the shrubbery, which looks a lot like the one in tape 6. The building is a huge decrepit church, and he looks through it and sees some birds or bats. Then goes back outside, and we get a shot of a graveyard, which I feel like there's multiple times where we get a shot of like a graveyard or like something where there's all these mounds and stuff, which makes me think it's like an old graveyard. I'm not too sure about that, but you'll see later on there are some shots of that. And see, this entry also had the birds and the bats and things like that, but clearly the visual disturbance was the ducking behind the fence. Tape 09 has the submission statement, visual disturbance detected, attempted to make contact, follow-up not required. Looking around in nature, and it's just so nice. Hell no. No, it ain't. We're out. Bye-bye. They walk around a lake or river, and then we see a shot of them looking straight at the eyes from earlier. It then cuts to a waterfall. I feel like looking off a cliff, to a rushing river, while there's these things following you that you're trying to find, probably is not the best idea, but this person already investigates like the creepiest crap I've ever seen, so go ahead, I guess. He starts going up these steps, and eventually it jump cuts to him going across this long bridge. When they get across and look back, there seems to be light again. He starts running, and then we get another cut to him walking, and there's another light. But this time, the lights are coming from a house, which is really weird because for once, it's not a decrepit one. It's already odd, and there's also a record spinning. Nah, what would be scarier than the record spinning and there'd be nothing playing and like in the middle of this? If the record was spinning and it was playing Vultures 2. I think I would run. I think I would book it and I would never come back. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, I think that'd be scarier than anything here. He investigates upstairs, and there's a room with some locks on it. There's just some generic rooms he goes around. And when he goes back down, something moves out of his view. And when he turns, lights appear again, where the thing moved from. Once he goes into a bedroom, a rocking chair starts rocking on its own. And, of course, that is where the video ends, because bro does not want to be there anymore, which I completely agree. I wouldn't want to be there. So, again, we keep seeing these supernatural things going on. I know that like right now I'm not like deep diving into each one, but it's because we're kind of getting crumbs for the build up. And later on you'll see where there's a lot more. Most notable thing you need to remember from this is that the house wasn't decrepit, which is it's completely out of place. There's electricity working in it despite there being no lights around. And also, he keeps trying to make contact with these creatures, but whenever he does try to approach them, they all go away. Which, to me, this is kind of the end of like our first section of videos, because if you'll notice, after a certain amount of videos, there's always a 30-minute compilation of lost footage, which is just a recap of the ones before it. So I'm going to say this is the end of like our first section, and it really is just a lot of introducing the idea of introducing the idea of what the channel is, the camera going around in the darkness. It kind of just sets you in the mood for this kind of ambience type horror, which reminds me a lot of like the back rooms. At the start of section 2, we have tape 10. The submission statement says, followed and watched. Attempt to make contact, but subject leaves. Follow-up not required. It starts off in a rainy forest. Our recorder actually notices a light for once, and then notices some eyes again. Something loud and weird starts flying around. Our person keeps wandering until they find another decrepit building. They look around, and we can notice some eyes again. He approaches the Skyrim-looking building before it cuts to our cameraman with sheep in an even more Skyrim-looking plane. This is already very odd. He then spots another building and approaches it oddly fast for how far away he was. There isn't much there, and he goes back to wandering the darkness. Which, in this entry, the biggest thing that you kind of need to keep in mind are those sheep. They come up a lot throughout, and they kind of tie into what I think is going on here. But the sheep keep popping up in this, like, dark plane with no light. It's very strange. Tape 11's submission statement says, stones in perfect alignment. Hearing was limited in the forest. Follow-up may be required. Our cameraman is walking through another plane, but what's weird is this time the ambience sounds like some odd liminal space music. And him having limited hearing may be caused by something that has to do with it. Also, the footage is a lot grainier and worse than usual, which again keeps happening. There's a nice lake and a random sheep in the woods. I told you to come back later. There seems to be this rock that looks like a castle and a bunch of rocks that could be grave sites, but I'm unsure. It's kind of one of those other ones where I'm like, it could be, but I'm not quite sure. Our camera person ends up in this Colosseum-shaped wall thing. At 1:39, we definitely see the eyes again, but also get a slight figure in the darkness. He then comes across this bridge that looks like it's kind of from Charlie Brown whenever he's upset. He traverses the bridge, enters another building, and at 3:15, you can see the same creature in the bottom left-hand corner. It's just these things keep following him in each tape. But let's keep pushing on through. Tape 12. The submission statement this time says, no disturbance, nothing following. Follow-up not required. We start out in a field of yellow flowers. We start getting weird footage of sheep with odd ambient music. We then see this horrifying tower. The footage gets darker as he approaches. He eventually looks up inside the tower and does a little spin, and then all of a sudden we're taken to a real looking house with a yard and garden. He ends up seeing another large tower, and the ambience picks up until the video ends. There not being a tape 13 already makes me not feel great about this one. Also, for once, the submission statement is actually very different. It says, no photo of Elizabeth's daughter was found. Leviathan said it would be here according to his notes. Follow-up required. This is the first time we're actually getting different names pop up down there. We just don't know if the submission statements are from like one person, someone reviewing the footage, a group, or somebody looking at like past footage. It's really interesting kind of how we're going to have to come up with what's going on here, but I'll get there. Also, I think the name Leviathan is an interesting choice. While of course, it could just be a code name. The Leviathan is a name that is given to a sea creature that is particularly large, or even a sea monster in some situations. But in the Bible specifically, the people refer to a whale, a crocodile, and the devil as a Leviathan. So to me, it's kind of odd that they choose this name, especially from what we're going to keep seeing as we go on. It's the first of many kind of biblical imagery that we start to see. The video starts off with the usual walking in the forest. Our camera holder walks up to this decrepit large building and enters. Here, it's clearly in disarray per usual, but we can also see children's toys and even a table set up like it would have been for a dinner. The camera person spots a newspaper in French that honestly doesn't look as withered as you'd expect. There's of course another bird. He follows it and dear God, so how? See, this is whenever a normal person would leave. But you know, I don't think we have a normal person. The cameraman goes up the stairs and looks around. They enter this room with some frames that all have photos, but one propped up is missing. The photo which makes me think that this is where Elizabeth's daughter's photo would be at, but there's nothing there. I will say though, there seems to be some photos of a family that a camera does look at, and also a picture of a baby, but I feel like based on how these people are going through these videos, they would have caught that. We also end up seeing a manger scene, which is even more Christian imagery, as I said before. After navigating steps and then going into another room, there's some louder music ambience that's haunting and also a mirror. They dip out of there and move on. There are many photos of people and some Christian figures around. There's a room that's interesting to me where the stuff doesn't look nearly as old as the rest does. And there's a desk set up with a phone as well. Our camera person seems to get scared, starts hustling outside. Then after that, we get a lot more forest ambience and a place with a bunch of mounds. And finally, a tall building that has spiral stairs. So in this tape, I feel like we're starting to get the hint at all this like Christian imagery, which I think could have to do with it, and I think is where kind of the sheep can come into. But I think it's where we start getting a lot of that, which starts helping explain stuff later. But also it's weird how we always have these out of place things. Like someone's been living in some of these places, not just like the decrepit old stuff like, oh, they lived here hundreds of years ago or 50 years ago. Some of the stuff just doesn't look nearly as old as the house itself does. And it's not just graffiti, it's posters, a phone that looks brand new. It's just weird stuff like that. And it's so out of place, which again starts building on to what I think is going on, which I'll get into later. But also we get the whole Elizabeth's daughter thing. Why is this person looking for that? And who is Leviathan? Who is either of them? But clearly somebody has already gotten to it before they could. Tape 15 is really short. The submission statement here is interesting as well, as it says, no envelope found in lockbox. Follow-up not required. At the start of the video, we get this shot of a crane. Honestly, a lot of the video is the person navigating this thing called the Blue Wonder in France, which if you remember, the last video was also in France. This now unused man-made structure is what they navigate. A lot doesn't happen until at the end. You can notice an eye at the end of the machine and then red ones out farther. Honestly, at first I thought this could have been like a telephone tower, but I'm pretty sure it was actually eyes that were supposed to be there, because it does look a lot like the orange ones from before. Tape 16 is the last one of this section and has the submission statement, minor auditory disturbances. Follow-up not required. It immediately starts off in front of this large building. Quickly, we get a weird human voice in the distance for once. It literally sounds way too human. It is not just a normal animal. Until now, we've had no other signs of human life. We can hear the voice many more times, like someone might be lost and is looking for them. You can keep hearing it throughout the video as the camera person just ignores it. Also, it seems like in every entry, more so, there seems to be this focus on decrepit religious buildings. Like I said, the whole Christianity thing, it seems like it keeps coming back. And even if it's just a regular house, it seems to be somewhere where a religious group gathers or something of the sort, or like that one house had the manger scene in it. I feel like the creator has to be pointing that out for a reason. But let's continue. Tape 17 is the first of the third section, and it has the most disturbing submission statement to this point. It says, visual disturbance detected. She wanted me to see her old room at the testing facility. Without the arrows, there would be no chance of return. Endless back room. Follow-up may not be possible. So, whoa. What? So you're telling me that this building is so impossible to navigate, they feel like it's endless, that you would get lost in it if you didn't have arrows pointing you around. So that's already a little weird. And also, who was at the testing facility? Well, let's watch and see what happens. At the start, they come across these trees with creepy dolls attached to them. What I think is interesting is baby dolls nailed to trees is a way of art and also folklore in some places, and could be alluding to illegal activities or just upsetting things going on. And they used them as a way to appease spirits. And clearly, wherever this world is, I don't think the spirits are very happy, so that makes sense. We then get a bunch of loud ambient music, and we see old clips from past videos go by. And then eventually we are shown footage that actually has some light with a small girl figure in the grass. And what's weird is it seems to be all the weird stuff that was spotted in the section 1 set of videos before the first compilation. We are then taken into what seems to be a decrepit old health institute of some sort, and it's clearly the testing facility referenced before. There's a bunch of arrows around, which seems to be what the description was talking about. Each room looks like a jail cell nearly. It would be like you were locked in there and they all look the same, and there's a toilet and a sink, and that's it. At 2:05, it could be the camera light, but also eyes. There's then this creepy noise that sounds like someone possibly laughing or crying at around the 2:50 mark. Our persons seem to find the room, or at least another room this place was trying to lead them to. It's light blue and has these destroyed laminates on it. They walk away and head out. As they go through more and more, it seems these arrows are insanely convoluted, not to mention that everything looks the same. It really is a maze, like the description was saying. Eventually we hear some noises again around 6:10, and then later on the cameraman seems to get startled by something. And then we jump outside. He comes across another chapel, decrepit as usual, and then notices some lights in the distance. So this is already a longer entry, and we got the whole description of the testing facility that has these endless back rooms. And as we see in the footage, it clearly does look convoluted, and it's hard for me to know how he even knows what arrows to follow. I guess the girl that told him, oh yeah, this is where I was, this testing facility or whatever, and these are the arrows I put here for you to follow. Maybe it was a specific color, like the purple ones he was supposed to follow and not the other ones, but they seem to all be very confusing. Also, is the girl in the forest or in the plain the same one that was in the testing facility, or the Elizabeth referred to before? We'll get there. But clearly, tape 17 is alluding to something much grander going on. Tape 18 is next and has the submission statement, was followed, follow-up not required. So, really nice. We are then seeing yet another cathedral. We also see another bird friend and some graffiti around. We also get this visual of a spider creating a web and catching flies within it, which to me could represent us or the cameraman getting caught in this web of mystery or whatever it is that he keeps investigating, he's getting into, and this universe or place he's in is just setting him up to get caught in it. We then get to a cut where there's a building that actually has a pretty bright light on it, and it's thunderstorming outside. We can see from 2:18 to around 2:20 in the bottom left-hand corner, there seems to be a figure watching out the window. We then get a shot of it raining yet again. And while this one is short, I really like the whole lightning thunder idea. I always like that in games or anything like that where the thunder is how you see. It also reminds me of that part in Faith where you're having to use the camera to get around, which I haven't played yet, but I've seen clips of it, and I always think stuff like that is really cool. The submission statement of tape 19 says, no disturbances detected. Location was not documented in the notes. Follow-up not required. What's weird is it starts in black and white, then just cuts to them outside of a mound or small pyramid. They go around it, and there's this very odd tree that's giving prop hunt. Because where are the rest? Why is there just one? But at 107, there could be eyes, but I'm not too sure on that one. They go to an old place of worship. They find an old cathedral and go inside of it as well. There could be a black figure at around 443, or that could just be a destroyed wall we can't see well. This entry honestly doesn't have much going on, and it's probably why it got left out. Tape 20 is one of the longest entries at 12 minutes, but our last long one to this point. The description says, cabinet was already gone through, no envelope, follow-up not required. It starts out walking up to another abandoned place with a steeple, as we typically see. They go inside, and there seems to be the cabinet referenced, which looks very out of place. Again, it looks newer and not as old as the rest of the stuff. And the thing that you'll notice is clearly, there's a whole bunch of junk in there, but there's no envelope. The rest of the time is spending ascending and descending stairs with varying ambience. He leaves the first place and then walks into another one. Then eventually shows imagery of 2 abandoned churches. And see, for how long it was, we really didn't get much of it, which I kind of like that this series does. It makes you have to watch the shorter entries because there could be really big things that happen in them, and the long ones might not have anything happen in them. It's just kind of an investigative thing going on. Tape 21 is the last of this section, and its submission statement says, visual disturbance detected. Drawings that should have been on her walls of the testing facility were here. Follow-up required. Which, if you remember, we heard about her in the test facility from tape 17. Eventually, at 117, they do find the drawings on the wall, which I think is interesting that at 117 we find out about drawings that should have been in the test facility from tape 17. While before this there may have been some odd occurrences on this tape, this is where things get seriously eerie. The drawings seem to be showing some demon or way larger being come across 4 people, and there's a sad moon or just a sad face, and eventually leaves mom, dad, and Y in the ground, leaving just one who the demon takes, or some kind of evil being. Then we see what looks like them taking the kid to a hellscape, and eventually maybe a cell, or it could be in reference to the facility. I'm not really sure. It looks like there's 2 yellow figures, and the demon takes one with them again. And I believe there's someone with a cape on. Then 3 X'd out faces are seen again. And finally, what seems to be remnants of a body and a yellow figure with the demon again. They then move on and start going through this area where heavy film grain comes in. They navigate into another cut where there's a destroyed room, and our bird friend is back for a quick hi. And so look, there's a lot that just happened with the drawings, which I think already starts alluding to the story, which is I'm going to bring up a lot more in my theory that I'm going to do. But clearly, we kind of get this story of a kid who may have been taken from their family, and their family was, removed, and this kid either watched it or saw it happen, and there seems to be this demon that's doing it. So it's hard to know if they were put in a facility, which you'll see where it shows them in a jail in this hellscape. I can't tell if it's a real demon that has been, I do think it is a real demon, but it either could be a real demon taking them to hell and they're in this cell, you know what I'm saying? Or it could be in reference to the people who took them from their home to a testing facility. And it's clearly the same her from the drawings who is alive now, or at least in some way is communicating with the person who is investigating now, right? So I think it is a key thing to keep in mind. Now we're at the start of section 4, which is our last section of videos to this point, which I think the series is very far from done. With tape 22, the submission statement says, transition space was obstructed. Sealed before arrival. Follow-up not required. It starts with our guy entering a building per usual, and then around 40 seconds in, we get a herd of sheep that come in. Sheep are typically seen to be test subjects in media. And also with Dolly the sheep being a clone and the whole CIA thing, I feel like you can start seeing where I'm leading. There's also a weird shape that comes on screen for 1 frame at 48 seconds. Once we come to a spiral staircase, there's 2 lights above, which cannot be the flashlight glare. But at 2:02, I believe we find what was referenced in the description. There's a door that is sealed up and leads just to nothing. We also hear a bird again shortly after, and they keep investigating around the building, and there isn't much. Before at the end, we see a bat, which is the end of that video. So again, you're hearing about this transition space that's closed and sealed up, and then there's just a door that leads to a wall of nothing. So that's already getting odd. And in the last entry before this, we heard about these drawings that were supposed to be in the test facility, but they're actually in this place. The next tape 23, has a really strange thumbnail. And also the submission statement just says, auditory disturbance. Follow-up not required. He starts walking up to a new building where there's many sheep. Of course, there are some eyes staring at dude for a lot of the time. When they enter the building, the recorder already seems distressed. There seems to be running steps at around 2 minutes, which is whenever I would be out of there. There's also a clear shadow in the window at 2:27. You can start to notice in this one the cameraman really is fast-paced about it. Usually he leisurely takes his time, as we've seen in all the past entries. But here, he's just trying to get out. There's also a stove in the house that looks out of place. which could mean someone is here. We see him eventually go back outside and roam around. He goes toward a small building, eventually a larger one. But it seems like it's super grainy compared to normal on the top left of it. Once he gets close enough, we get a jump cut to what we saw in the thumbnail. It seems to be the same girl from the field from before, but now it's in red it's like a figure on top of this like stand. And the room is completely like blood red, which is the end of tape 23. And I just find it really interesting. Clearly this girl is important. It might be the daughter. Hold on. I'm going to hold off on what I'm going to get to. But now we're going to go into the final tape to this point, and then we can go into my grander theory about stuff. Tape 24 what's interesting about tape 24, it was actually made 2 days before I started writing the script for this, which is like already like what? But so perfect timing. But the submission statement says, no disturbances detected. Follow-up not required. We get the usual beginning of walking toward a building in the dark. While he walks outside, we get the usual ambience. But also for a short time, we get no sound at all, like the zero sound I said before. While he wanders around, we also end up seeing tire marks, which is very strange because we haven't seen any vehicles to this point. He ends up going inside of a house that of course is decrepit, but nowhere nearly as bad as the others. There's a blue book on the table which is called Peoples of Bombay, and seems to be a book about traditions for women in India. Also a photo of people standing in a group, just like the ones from before. At 2:40, there's also this very strange wheelchair. And he keeps looking in the bathroom like he wants to find something but finds nothing. And eventually he leaves. And that marks the end of the 20 tapes or 21 tapes that we currently have of Briscoe Park. And now I can actually start diving into my full analysis and theory of what I think could be going on. So as far as theories go, I do have a decent bit, and I have one big one that I want to get to. But first, I just want to preface that lately, like the entire series, we have started to get more and more info as the tapes went on. But honestly, there isn't a lot of trails to go on. There isn't very many crumbs for us to, get. There isn't really any chunks for us to get to know a whole lot. So I could end up being way off about all this in the future. But currently, my theory goes like this. I feel like the world that this camera wanderer is navigating is some kind of post-rapture sort of world, as many of the places that they venture to are decrepit churches, and even when they go to houses or things like that, there's some kind of religious gathering related to it, as well as like the manger scene in that one house. And I feel like it all ties into the idea of, I do think there's also the CIA stuff going on with the universes and things like that. So what I believe could have happened is initially it was just the CIA, let's say, or some kind of group trying to figure out a way to open up their world into new universes, maybe for power or for, just figuring out that kind of deal. And so the way they went about it was they were testing it by sending animals through. And then eventually, I think Elizabeth's daughter, who was referenced, ends up being somebody who got sent through as like the first human to be sent through. But then once this happened, I feel like the universes could have merged, or some kind of break happened where I think, due to all the Christian imagery and things such of that sort, I think that the world its light was taken away by like God or some kind of figure like that, came down. And obviously something like breaking into a whole other universe would be something that would be against a religion of that sort. So I believe that once they found out, how that worked, it caused possibly the rapture to happen. And I think another example of this is the transition space thing, right? Well, yes, you could consider the transition space that was sealed up to be a place where someone went through a universe and then came out the door and was in that one. But what I've started to think about is, why would it be sealed up right after it? I believe that it's called a transition space because it was a place where people were transitioning into heaven during the rapture, and it was a way they could safely do so without, like, if they were, worthy of that. But I'm saying they could do so without being, killed or anything like that. So whenever everything went to hell, they were all in this safe space that they sealed up and just waited for the end days to come. And so whether or not they were saved or not, they still sealed themselves away in that room. But there's also, like I said, there is the whole idea of the other universes and things such as that. But I feel like since we're wandering a world that looks so much like ours most of the time, I feel like it would be a lot more like either these universes merged or our universe got taken apart in some way. And the whole Elizabeth's daughter and things like that, I think that there was a woman who was taken to the testing facility and eventually got in contact with the group that we see working in these videos, right? And they told him about everything that happened. And then eventually we see the drawings that show like the demon getting them, taking out their family, and then getting them, proceeding to, put them in like a cell and things like that. And then what I started to think happened is maybe, once all that happened and they came back, that's whenever they got put in the testing facility, right? Let's say they got taken by a demon of some sort, got taken to hell and had this experience. But then once they came back, people didn't believe them or thought they were, thought something interesting was happening. But the CIA was like, oh, they went through, like we were trying to figure out. So then they put them in a testing facility and then figured out how this break into other universes worked with Elizabeth's daughter. But that is just kind of my guess as to what I think is going on. And I think our cameraman is a part of some group after the fact of a previous one that is trying to figure out what's going on, how maybe they can help things, and maybe how they can help Elizabeth's daughter, who seems to be trapped in this world or out there just somewhere in the world. And all the things that are watching them and things like that, I think they're demons or they're like shades of people kind of from other universes, because you hear like humans and things like that, but I feel like they would have demons who can mimic humans, kind of like, the alternates from Mandela Catalog, like that kind of deal. And I think that could be what explains all the things that keep looking at our wanderer all the time, or are running or sound human, because there is possibly something out there, or there are demons that are making them think there's something out there. And I feel like the whole idea is to get these people kind of entranced in here, and hopefully they can figure out what's going on. But I think what they're trying to do is get them trapped in here. And you can clearly tell this world was inhabited before. And that's what leads me to the rapture idea, was like the tire tracks and all the houses and the decrepit churches and things like that. That really makes me think that the world that we are navigating is like a post-rapture world. So that is really where my theories kind of lean toward. And I know it's a little bit shorter of a theory analysis, but that is kind of my gathering of what we actually have so far, because this creator really makes sure to, there really isn't a whole bunch to go on, but it's been building up lately, and I think it will continue to build up. And that's why I think you should stay along for their series. But I really enjoyed Briscoe Park, and I hope you did too, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis on it. I thank you so much for watching, and any feedback is really appreciated. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it. I've been Colton. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe.